All right, everyone, welcome back. And thank you very much for staying with us since the beginning of the conference. It's a long day, but hopefully you are able to take some break. So I'm just going to see whether Lynn has joined us. Yes, Lynn is here. So I'm just going to promote Lynn to panelist. So the next part of this conference is the Speakers' Corners, and we are going to start with a pre-recorded video of Sue Saunders, who is the founder of Schools Out UK and has been an activist in this field for a very long time. I'm just looking for, there it is, the video, so fantastic. And it's an interview with Sue Saunders. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Hello, Lynn. She's going to...
Hello, I'm just sorting out my my video, which is not working, but I'll be with you shortly.
That's okay. I'm just going to share the screen now. If you want to put yourself on, switch off your camera. So we're going to start with an interview with Professor Sue Saunders. Please work. Yes, hallelujah. I like it when that works. Oh, let me make sure that I share the sound actually. There we go. There's actually a new feature on Zoom. No, that's not it. Sorry. So can you all hear this?
Hi, I'm Sue Saunders. I'm Chair of Schools Out UK, and this is
Lynn, and I am the Chair of Trustees for Schools Out UK. Who are Schools Out UK? They are the longest running LGBT education charity in the UK. We've been going since 1974. We started off from when protecting teachers and working with teachers, and we have evolved from there. We are the founders of LGBT History Month UK, celebrated every February throughout the UK. And we are the founders of The Classroom, a resource site of free resources for teachers. And I'm here today with Sue to talk a little bit more about the work we do and why education is important and why you must make it inclusive for everybody. So Sue, why is it so important? Why do we do it?
Well, if you leave out LGBT plus people, you leave out disabled people, you leave out Black people, you leave out women, you leave out different religions, because everybody has by now noticed that LGBT people are in all the protected strands. And as you can see from my hair, I've been around a long time. I had to fight Section 28, and if you don't know about it, that's grand. If you do know about it, you know how awful it was. 15 years of schools really doing very little about LGBT, and that then meant masses of bullying and hate crime going on in schools. We're in a different place now. However, lots of schools still are not thinking inclusively. And I think after the Black Lives Matter events last year and the Me Too events, people are beginning to join up and beginning to think, actually, we need to recognize the full diversity of everybody within our school curriculum. So it's grand that people are catching up, and we have all the resources to help them to do just that.
And I think it's really important that you say it's the experiences. So just like us and Diversity Role Models have done some brilliant research looking at the experiences of children. And one of the statistics is 91% of children have never heard anything positive about LGBT people in schools. 91% of children.
It's horrific. And I mean, it's something I identify with, because obviously nothing happened when I was at school. The irony was I was being taught bisexual, gay and lesbian people, but never ever identified as such. So I went through my entire adolescence in touch with these people, but never actually knowing about them. So we're here to make that difference, to make sure that people know about the existence of LGBT plus people in all their diversity.
And Schools Out work specifically to embed it in lessons, so it's not just a one-off thing each year. And it's got a special way of doing it and a use of language. Could you tell us a bit more about that, Sue?
Sure. We came up with the concept of the classroom. And I had been, when I'd been doing my training, often talked about usualizing, because I thought the word normal and normalizing was highly problematic. Who's normal? And it's a very pejorative term, and it's often used against disabled people. So it was not a term that I wanted to use at all. So I came up with the concept of just using this usualizing. So in the classroom website, what we have is over 80 lesson plans that usualize LGBT plus people across the entire curriculum and for all ages. So the idea is, and I would urge people to use this concept of usualizing around disability, around race, around gender, around religion. It's a very simple concept. Once you've got it in your mind, it's easy to do. And it means you don't do the gay lesson, which is something which Schools Out has always said, not a good idea. So what you do is you just drop it into a lesson. So there's a delightful, for instance, maths lesson where the shapes that the kids are working with to do geometry, etc. with, are the shapes come from Brighton Pavilion, Brighton Pride, the pavilion and the tents. It's as simple as that. It just usualizes our existence. Once you've done that, you can then move on to doing a bit more actualizing and giving more information. But the whole concept of the classroom is to give you really simple, easy lesson plans in Word with a PowerPoint. You can pick it up and take it straight into the classroom, but we've done it in Word so you can play with it and make it your own. So those lesson plans are there to usualize LGBT people, and as I say, quite across the curriculum, in geography, in history, in English, in maths, in science. So it is just that, usual.
And I think that's brilliant. The usualization is the one thing we really need to get into schools and across society. But one of the things we know is that in some curriculum subjects, it's harder to have a whole lesson plan. So for STEM, we've introduced some specific activities, and we're just building on those at the moment with our absolutely fabulous and amazing project worker, Sarah. She is working through producing STEM resources at the moment about STEM careers so that they're more reflective of the LGBT community as a whole. Now, Sue, we've talked about lessons, we've talked about what we can do, and we've talked about the website, the classroom. But what else can schools do?
Well, back in 2005, we also founded LGBT History Month, which I'm hoping all of you are aware of. It's every February. We have a massive website which supports that. Every year we come up with a different theme. Next year for 22, we've got political artists, LGBT political artists, which is very exciting. And there'll be lots of resources on there connected to that theme. But if you go across the website, you'll find all the resources for past years, and you'll find posters, you'll find all sorts of videos, and we put lots and lots of it, and it's all free for you to use. So there is no reason why you can't plaster the entire school with an amazing array of diverse and incredibly exciting LGBT resources. But very excitingly, this year we managed to get a competition happening around the country, and a young person from the Proud Trust youth group designed this badge. So we're going to do this from now on. The information will be on our website and on our Facebook, so keep an eye out. You can get your kids involved so that, in fact, very excitingly, one of your young people might be the person who designs the 23 badge. Truly exciting, and it's another way of getting people involved.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I have to say that Schools Out has been instrumental in helping us get Pride in Education off the ground. The very, very first conference was launched with Sir Derek Jacobi, Bonnie Greer, Professor Sue Saunders, and they've been a very, very strong supporter of the conference. So I'm really delighted to welcome you back. Lynn, would you like to introduce yourself and describe yourself for the people who are visually impaired? And there's a question from Marzia. Would it be possible to share the link about the LGBT February? Yes, absolutely. So while you're introducing yourself, Lynn, I'm going to drop the link to Schools Out and LGBT History Month, as well as the classroom. And as Sue rightly said, all of the teaching resources and lesson plans are free. You just download them, and then boom, shakalaka, boom, boom. You can use them in your lessons.
So I'm Lynn, and I have brown hair, I have large glasses, I have a orange dress with fabulous leaf prints because I love them. I also have a necklace which is a tree necklace. My name is Lynn Nichols and I am chair of Schools Out. I've not done an audio description before, so hopefully that was right.
Yeah, perfect.
Fabulous. So you asked me here today to speak about inclusive education and why it's so important. And for me, I'm incredibly passionate about it. My own experience of education was far from inclusive, and I identify as bisexual. I have dyslexia, and I also have some hidden disabilities. So my experience of education was very challenging. So my love of learning never went away, but my actual experience of education was not fabulous. And I want for another and any other generation or child to go through that. But we have an imperative as educators or as people working anywhere within the education sector, whether it be voluntary, whether it be in a paid capacity, to make sure that education is for everybody and it is inclusive, and it's inclusive of the full LGBT plus spectrum. If we don't, we know what happens. There's been surveys on Just Like Us survey, there's been surveys from diversity role models. We have to safeguard children, and we are failing in our safeguarding duty if we do not have inclusive education. Because if we don't, what happens is children are bullied, and eventually some children sadly take their own lives. And we just can't have that happen. We are there to educate, we are there to help guide the future generation and provide an education that everybody can access. But if we're not doing that, then we're failing, because everybody should feel like they can access it. They should be comfortable sitting in that classroom. They shouldn't have to think about anything else other than learning in that classroom. And actually making that an environment where they can learn is a key priority. And we talk about the whole LGBT spectrum, and I'm passionate about that. I'm bisexual, and often bisexuals are misrepresented in the press from within the community, and are just forgotten about often. When we tend to do things on the LGBT community, or we try to embed that in lessons, we often focus on one aspect of the community, and we forget that people in the community come from all walks of life, come from all cultures, and some have disabilities, some don't. But LGBT people are the spectrum of humanity, and we need to really reflect that if we're to be truly inclusive. And there's many ways in which you can do that. Schools Out definitely has resources. It's got the classroom resources, and we have them there free because we want people to use them. But there are also many other organisations doing fantastic things, like diversity role models, like the Proud Trust, like Educate and Celebrate, and like the amazing author Hot Benoli. They're all helping to contribute to provide resources that you can use in your classroom to make them more and more inclusive. And we really do need to move to doing that as a society, because we need people to have life chances. And if they don't get the education, that seriously impacts their life chances. And there's many ways in which you can get involved, and you can do that. And by registering today, you've already shown a commitment to do that. And I totally understand that there are conflicting priorities within education, and it can be challenging, but there are imperatives from the changes in the curriculum to do so. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible, so that there are resources which you can embed into lessons or entire lesson plans. The Proud Trust also have lesson plans which you can use as well. And we just have to look at what's happening in Scotland. They've managed to have a change in the entire curriculum and actually have resources which every teacher can access and use. We don't have anything like that in England and Wales on Ireland yet. We have resources that are out there, but we don't have that commitment. And the more that we diversify our curriculum, the more people can learn and feel comfortable learning and have better outcomes from it. So if you just do one thing from today, It's actually just really think about how you can embed that in. It's small changes. It doesn't have to be anything radical. It's just thinking about the examples you use in displays, thinking about the examples you use actually in lessons. And I realise it's harder in some subjects than others. And in some subjects, it will be quite challenging, but there are creative ways in doing it. There are some amazing teachers out there. One who did maths lessons based on pride flags, which was genius. And there's loads of ways in which you can get that involved and get into diversifying your lessons, even if you'll have a specific subject area. But I also want to talk about youth groups in the youth sector. So I was a guider for 10 years and I worked and ran a Brownian guide unit. And the guide movement has definitely moved on a long way from when I was there. But if you're running a youth service, it's remembering that that needs to be inclusive too. It's not acceptable for it not to be. You need to really think about those things that if you're running a session, how you can make that more inclusive, how you can make sure everybody can feel that they can fully participate in that lesson or in that activity. Because the youth sector is something that children have chosen to engage with. They want to be there. They want to be part of something, whether it be the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme, whether it be guides or scouts, whether it be a youth club. They've chosen generally to be there. They want to be there and they want to take part and they want to feel part of something. But if they're being part of something that denies who they are, that's very, very challenging and leaves lifelong impacts on them. So if you run a group, it's really important to make sure you consider everybody that you're running that group for. And there's lots of different ways in which you can just bring something else in that will let those children know that you're there for them and that you're there to support them, because they are our future generation. And we can usualize, not normalize, we can usualize. I love that word that Sue brought in, because if you usualize it, you basically, you're taking the stigma that comes away from saying normal. And if you usualize LGBT people's lives, it's just we're just a part of society. We contribute, we do amazing things. And it's just reflecting the society that's out there. And I know this can come with challenges in different areas. And I know it can be challenging in schools and you need support, but that's what Schools Out and other organisations are here to do, to help you educate, because it makes a lesson more exciting, more engaging, and we want it to be embedded, not just that one gay lesson that you do every year for Pride or you do every year for LGBT History Month. It's really getting it embedded through, so it's drip fed throughout your lessons. And in primary, it's easier because you can do it in topics. But in secondary, it's thinking about what examples you use, like we've said, what examples you can use in that particular activity. So it's just part of the normal school life. And if you are in a school setting, it's thinking about, do you have a diversity group for your students? Because that's another way of bringing it in. And that isn't in the less formal lessons, but that's within the school community. Do you celebrate the different days and weeks throughout the year, or do you just do that one thing? What can you do to bring it more into the lessons? And one of the things we thought that was a perfect way for people to engage and for teachers and for youth organisations to take part is the badge competition. Now, we have a badge every year, as Sue said, for LGBT History Month. And this year it's amazing. It has been designed by a participant of the Proud Trust. And we went out to all different schools at different levels and asked them to design the badge. And the theme is art, the arc is long. And the badge design we got was just fabulous. And that was a great opportunity because it teaches all sorts of different skills, because it's a project, it's designing, it's art, it's technology, it's all rolled into one package. So it's a perfect way for schools to get involved. The information about that's going live on Monday, so this is the advanced preview. And the badge competition, you can start working on it from January to March next year. So we're giving you plenty of advance notice. But the badge at the end, the winning design, will actually go across the country and across the country nationally even. And that says a massive thing about your school and your organisation and its commitment to diversity and inclusion. It's free to join the competition, and there are prizes for the winners. But it's something that you can do that's tangible, that's already there, and a pre-made activity that you can use with your students, and you can take part with your students. So from Schools Out, we have done lots of things. We also have the Out in the Past Festival. So the Out in the Past Festival, we're working in conjunction with the organisation that runs that to provide sessions throughout LGBT History Month in February in school, in museums, in libraries, one's in a school, but generally there are museums and libraries of resources about the lives of LGBT people from history. And we've got them across the country and in Ireland as well. And those events are amazing. They're great events that you can take. The ones that are happening in person are great events that you could take classes to, or you could just go on your own to those particular events. And a lot of them are also online, so resources that you can then use with your class or your youth group in future. And it's amazing to have so many hubs. I think at the last count, we've got something like 30 hubs. And so that's 30 different locations across the country that have committed to providing an LGBT history exhibition and event during LGBT History Month to make LGBT history come alive. And what more could you want to actually, for your children to have something to engage with, and something that's living and breathing and that's out there and that really retells and recounts the history of LGBT people across the spectrum. So there's, as I say, there's lots of ways. There's LGBT History Month, there's Out in the Past, and there is the badge competition. Then there's the classroom and all the classroom resources. So there's lots of tools which you can use to help. But I'd like to know from the audience, and I'm just going to check that I'm able to do this, if you had any particular questions or any particular challenges that you face. If anybody's there. Oh, thank you for the feedback. Is there any particular challenges and blockages? Because it's an amazing thing to do. It's exciting. It's something that you can really bring into your lessons. But what's your barrier? What's stopping you? Is it because the organisation's not supportive and there's some work to do there? Time, I totally understand, because time as a teacher is just like, oh. But is it you just don't know and you're frightened of getting it wrong? Because if it's you're frightened of getting it wrong or you need support, reach out, because there's organisations literally there to help you, who want you to do this, because it is fundamental. We don't want any more children to take their own lives or live with long-term mental health consequences because they do not feel safe in their school. It's not even about them feeling accepted, which would be brilliant and we really need to get to. But at the moment, there are children who feel fundamentally unsafe to go to school. And that should just not happen. And we really need to work together to help prevent that. And everybody can play their part in that. However, and it may seem small, but that one lesson or that one activity that you do for a child that's in there will really make a big difference. I'm just reading some of the chat.
Yeah, I've just seen, so one contributor is saying that they're a bit scared of not being respectful with some families, e.g. religious, Muslim, Christian, Catholic, etc. What I say to people is, like, you can be gay and Muslim, you can be gay and Christian, you can be gay and Jewish, you can be gay and Sikh, Hindu. Faith, religion and belief are not exclusive of sexual orientation, gender identities and expressions. So it's, what's the difference between religious belief and religious interpretation? And your truth is not universal truth. And I think there is space for everyone to be their authentic selves. So when people use their religion as an excuse, I've been to a lesbian wedding in a synagogue. The Inclusive Mosque Initiative in the UK actually is very, very inclusive. and they've had women leading prayer, and they're accepting of trans women. So for every negative experience, there is a positive counter experience that do you agree, Lynn? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I speak on, I'm a Christian, and I've had an interesting journey with my faith. Actually, no, that's wrong. I've had a very straightforward journey with my faith, I've always believed, but a very interesting journey with interacting with religious institutions, I think would be the best way of putting it. But I think that if I get there is a tension, and I'm not going to say there isn't a tension, because there can be a tension in some schools, but it's how it's delivered. You're simply delivering the fact that there are LGBT people in the world and they've done amazing things. You're not saying it's right, it's wrong. You're just saying there are LGBT people in the world and this is the stuff that they have done. That is amazing, and you shouldn't therefore get into any issues. But you have to remember the LGBT spectrum is huge, and you will have LGBT people there who are of faith. And I speak with a different hat with diversity role models in schools, and I go into faith schools specifically. And one of the questions we do is, it's like a little 2 truths and a lie. And so you say 2 truths and there's 1 lie in there. And in my section, I say I'm Christian. And every time they go, oh, you can't be that, that must be the lie. And I was like, no, that is and this is with the faith schools. And then we have a really interesting discussion with year 7s and year 8. It's usually much more productive. In year 9 and 10, it can be a little bit more challenging. But with year 7s and year 8s, they usually go, oh, and the penny suddenly drops. And it is amazing. And I really feel, I'm going to use a term I wouldn't normally use in this forum, but I feel blessed to be able to do that. Because I just think it's amazing for that one child that's sat in there to know that they are perfectly as they were designed, as they are, and that they are wonderful human beings. And just to see that child, and you always know which one it is, to see that child just have that level of relief taken off their shoulders because somebody's come in to speak about what's possible. Because you can't, to some extent, there's a thing that's said with women and empowerment about you can't be what you can't see. But you almost can't know that actually you're okay if you don't see it. So actually having those examples there makes a really, really big difference. But I do get there is a tension, and it's the way it's delivered that will dissipate some of that tension.
I also want to say that things are changing. Very recently, I was commissioned to deliver a series of training to the Methodist Church in the UK, who have just voted to celebrate same-sex marriages and also ban conversion therapy. And I think it's an outstanding example of a religious institution which is welcoming and making a conscious effort to be more inclusive of our community. Yeah. And I'm hoping that one day I won't need to be commissioned to come in and do training because it's not going to be needed. So yeah, things are changing. Lewis is saying, I know that in our schools, some teachers have expressed that they feel unprepared to have any follow-up discussion if any pupils react negatively in the classroom. I've got a couple of things to say to that, and I'd really love to hear your views, Lynn. The first thing is, if you're not sure how to do it, seek the support and expertise of someone who's comfortable and has got extensive experience of doing it. Bring in someone who's been doing that work for decades, and there's a lot of us around where you can actually get that support. And the second thing is, how do you challenge sexism or racism? For me, it's no different than homophobia, biphobia, or transphobia. So for me, discrimination is discrimination. And to put it really simply, it's saying something bad that's going to hurt someone. And as you were quietly saying earlier, Lynn, actually, the work that we do saves lives. There's no 2 ways about it. It's been demonstrated by extensive research that if young people and even adults cannot be their authentic selves, it leads to dramatic personal circumstances.
I'd also point out that if children leave school with those same expressing those same attitudes, they could end up at the wrong side of the law from hate crime. So there's a duty in that sense of actually saying, well, you may have that opinion, but be mindful how you express it, because once you are 18, you would be subject to the laws that are around hate crime. And we've had to have, with diversity role models, we had to have that difficult conversation in a school about, that's your opinion, but if you express it in the manner that you have been, this is what your outcome could be. And that's a very hard one, and that's a very extreme situation. I think if you're not feeling comfortable, I get that, I totally get that. And I also get somebody else put about not wanting to say the wrong thing and wanting to be able to support afterwards. I do agree with the school approach. I do agree with the whole school approach. And especially if you're not feeling particularly confident, a whole school approach and something it's embedded in does help. And that comes from your management and leadership team. But if you are feeling confident that you can do that on your own, then obviously you can go ahead. But getting help, getting other organisations coming in can help you do it. But we want to move away from it being that one gay lesson. So you start from having other organisations come in, but you need to, it's the embedding it into the curriculum. And it's thinking about, if you're in an English lesson, thinking about the examples you use. And there is lots and lots of LGBT people throughout literature. So that's a perfect place where you could start. So, and as I say, I know it's more challenging in different areas. So like in STEM, you can use careers rather than particular aspects. But it is, I get that, it is challenging. So reach out for support. You're already halfway there because you're here. You spent your Saturday, the first Saturday of half term, which if I was a teacher, I might have a hangover today if it was my first day off. So if, you know, we spent that day and you spent it on this call wanting to find out more, reach out to Schools Out. I'll answer, and we've got other people who can help support. There are lots of organisations that can help come in, but start small. If you're not completely confident, literally start small with one little thing in your lesson. It will make a difference to somebody. You may never know till years later. But that one lesson, I know I remember this, my science teacher, Miss Calladine, as she was then, and Miss Mason, there was a lesson and it was very bizarre. She said something about it was something in summertime about not shaving. She hadn't shaved her armpits, and I was like, oh, women have to shave their armpits. Women must shave. And she's like, why do women have to shave anything? This was the start of the conversation. It was in sixth form. And then she said, I wax, so it's fine. But they were just like, women don't have to. But she said, and somebody at that point said, oh, because that makes you a lesbian. And she went, I'm not having that. Now, this is the point, I was still in there's still section 28. So she risked a lot by having this conversation. And she said, why do you think that is acceptable? That is not acceptable. And actually, that's a stereotype, and started talking about stereotypes. And I was sat there questioning, but not wanting to be, knowing in my head, I was like questioning, but not really wanting to question who I was. And that made the massive difference to me that she took that risk. And she took that risk when section 28 was in, when they weren't supposed to talk about it in schools. So something really small and a very small conversation can make a difference. I do understand about safeguarding, so it's worth, and the fact that what happens with the child afterwards if you open the floodgates. So it's a case of trying to make sure that your school actually has something in place. Does it have mentoring? Does it have counselling? Does it have a policy on how it supports its LGBTQI students? Finding some of that out first. But also, you don't have to do the work. There's a whole school body. And it's just start small. I mean, I hope that helps, but I do totally get it is challenging. And there's one specifically about primary. Did you see that? Which said the primary schools are uncomfortable with tackling about criticism from parents. And I think it's to do with age. So Hop and Ollie are amazing. They produce children's books that are age appropriate and discuss LGBT in a manner which children can understand. But I just think it's simple. You start with having your books and that you choose to use in school be more diverse and inclusive. When you talk about families, there's an amazing book from Todd Parks that talks about families, and it talks about families, and it's all done in primary colours, and it says 2 men, it has 2 women, it has children that are adopted, it has single parent families. It's all wrapped up in one book. It's called Families from Todd Park. It's a stunning resource, and it's a really simple way to just introduce the diversity of different relationships. And it happens to have some LGBT relationships within that book, but it talks about the diversity. Yeah,
fantastic. Just the comments are just flooding. It is really interesting conversation that we're having right now. I just want to pick up on a couple of things that you said. You're absolutely right. It's about usualizing and not normalizing, because I am normal. I'm just not the norm. And getting people to understand that we're all on a spectrum, from our skin color, from the whitest to the darkest, from our gender identities and expressions, from our body sizes, our abilities or disabilities, you know. So the sooner people wake up and smell the coffee, the more compassionate society we will have. Marza is saying, I feel like I do not know enough to do something wrong. If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. I always encourage my students to make mistakes, because that's how it's part of the learning process.
But also, if you do feel that way, there are some actual groups for teachers to support teachers through that, to help you feel more confident. So there are some support mechanisms out there. Please reach out to Schools Out, we can put you through to some. But there are groups that are out there. They've started from the ground. It's amazing. There's one called Norfolk D&I, and I love it. I follow their Twitter feed and through, and they've got together and they're really wanting to work in Norfolk to increase diversity and inclusion. And it's a group of teachers who just have thought, we really want to do this, and we want to make sure that our children have a well-rounded education that shows the representation of society and life in the UK. And
thank you.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, because we've got an international audience. 63% were from the UK. So Section 28 was a piece of legislation that came in 1988, which prevented the public sector from promoting, in inverted comma, homosexuality, and it was repealed only in 2003. And obviously, if you are in a country, and there are 69 of them, who criminalizes the LGBTIQA plus community, you have a duty of care to yourself, first of all, so make sure that you are safe. We were talking to Pearson this morning, because they are present in 200 countries, and there's like 3 models that one can use in terms of LGBT inclusion. So you can do like one in Rome, which is basically not do anything, have the embassy model. So even though you are in a country where it is illegal, within the walls of your organization or your school, you are safe and protected. Or you can choose the activist route, which is supporting and campaigning with the help of organizations which specifically help LGBTIQI plus people. So I thought it was important to make that very subtle distinction. Is it Bex from the DI in Norfolk? Because
that's it, yeah,
they were at the last conference. So if you go to Pride in Education YouTube channel, you can see the recording of the previous conference, and they were there. Brilliant.
And they just say Norfolk DEI Network, and they're on Twitter.
They're on Twitter, yeah.
At Norfolk DEI.
Susanna said it's important to include representative examples throughout the curriculum in teaching all the time, rather than a standalone event session, because that ends up being even more othering. I couldn't agree with you more. I am a lesbian 365 days a year, not just for Pride. So don't take me out and put me back in the closet. And I think we need to look at it from an intersectional point of view. I'm a woman of color, I've got a hidden disability, and I'm also a lesbian. The other thing I was going to say is, like, I was super excited when you agreed to come and speak, Lynn, because there is such a lack of representation for bisexuals. And every year when we do the Pride in Education call for contributions, we ask people to identify themselves if they wish. And it's always difficult to find the more marginalized voices within our community. So there's a lot of gay stuff and lesbian, but then trans, non-binary, intersex or bi are often forgotten. So I'm really glad that you're out and you're visible, because we need that representation. And to finish off, the bisexual community is being stigmatized by the heteronormative community as well as within the LGBTIQA+ community. So I'm really glad to have you here. I see you, I love you, and I welcome you.
Thank you. I mean, it is one of those things where I had a journey with my own sexuality, and I identified bisexual. My interpretation is probably closer to pan. So bisexual is more attracted to more than one gender. Pan is attracted irrespective of gender. But I'm more comfortable with the bi identity. yeah, kind of identity from that side. And there is a bi culture. You can find a bi culture out there, but it is very marginalized. We only had the first bi pride 2 years ago because
In the UK.
yeah, in the UK, yeah. And it's and also I find in other countries where there are LGBT groups, you don't necessarily hear the bi voices, except they've been there since the beginning. They're just not the ones that are necessarily spoken about. And also if you are running a group, the bi voice is usually the one that you don't know always attract, or people don't always identify. And there's a very different experience for a bisexual woman to a bisexual man, and different stigmas. So for bisexual women, it's the high sexualization of it, and that causes extreme difficulties. I've had difficulties at work. I've had to take a senior manager through a disciplinary process because they thought that that was a flag for wanting to be with everybody, including them. The answer was no. So it was definitely no. But that has been a challenge, and not one I really expected to face. I think the one that hurt the most was the challenge from within the community, because I had very much an image that the LGBT community would be supportive of everybody, and everybody was wonderfully supportive. And although many people were, I also had people who did not accept my bisexual identity, who questioned it. I've been married to my amazing wife, or we've been together 20 years in April. So they were like, well, how, that's disrespectful to your partner, to your wife. I'm like, no, it's not. She's a lesbian, I'm bisexual. We both know the score. It's pretty straightforward. But that was a really hard thing to take. And I think when we're talking about the breadth of the LGBT plus community, especially when we're talking with older children, we shouldn't shy away from the problems within the LGBT community, whether that be racism within the LGBT community, whether that be biphobia within the LGBT community, or transphobia. We shouldn't really shy away from it, because that's the lived experience. And although we don't, it's hurtful and it isn't something that should be happening, and it really does hurt me to my core, because I'm like, why can't we just support each other when we've all been on this journey? It's something that we can't shy away from, because if we do, then we're part of the problem. So I think for the older level, looking at issues within the community is important as well, just being mindful how you do it.
Thank you. I'm just looking in the chat for the comments. I've just put in the link on Twitter to the DEI Norfolk network. Follow them, and they've got regular meetings, and everybody's welcome. They love sharing resources. They're absolutely brilliant.
There was one thing there that was about feeling isolation, and it can feel hard. It really can feel challenging and difficult, and just you could feel like the only voice, or the only voice of in your school. And I'm not naive to the fact that in many educational institutions there are people who are homophobic, biphobic, transphobic, and that's just who they are, and they haven't moved on and changed from that position, and that can make it incredibly uncomfortable to teach there. But you're there to support the children, you really are there for them, but you do have to make sure that you get support for yourself, and that you make, because it's something that's been said to me many times, and I love this one. It's if you don't look after yourself first, you can't give back to others. So you need to feel safe, and there are some countries it's not safe to do it in. You need to make sure it's fine, especially if you're in some cultures where it can be a fireable offence. It may not be appropriate to do it. It's, you have to work out for your country and your culture what is legally and what is appropriate, so that you remain safe, so you can still continue teaching.
Thank you. I like the analogy of the oxygen mask, like put it on yourself before you put it on others. So self-care is really, really important. Lynn, oops, are you still there? Yes. I want to thank you so very much. I think the work that Schools Out and LGBT History Month has, and the classroom and Out in the Past has done over 4 decades, if I'm not mistaken, is absolutely phenomenal. I think it is getting better. And conferences like Pride in Education and Out in the Past are really there to support, raise awareness, and provide practical resources so that if people want to be more inclusive, I just dream of the day where we don't need to have an LGBT
It
history
would be
month,
amazing.
where we don't need a Black History Month, where we don't need the Educating Out Racism, which is another conference that I run, which will be out in February. Yes, thank you so much. Let me see, more comments are coming.
I want to say it's been a real pleasure, and thank you so much for the comments, because when you're up here speaking, you don't know if you're having an impact. So it's great to know that you have questions, and great to share. If you do want to get hold of us, Schools Out is on there, so please do. I'm more than happy. If it isn't me, I'll signpost you to the correct person. But there are also amazing other organisations, and I dream of the day when, like Scotland, it's embedded in the curriculum. And I mean the whole spectrum of diversity and inclusion, not just the LGBT bits. I'd like that all to be embedded through, and like Scotland have started the journey with LGBT embedding it in. I'd love the day when in England and in Wales and in Ireland it was embedded too. But, you know, we're getting there, and people, and the fact that you've come here today is amazing, because you've made that commitment, and I'm thankful for you for being here.